So today is this is the third and final of my series. Can you all hear me okay? This is the third and final of my little series on faith in action. And part one has all been about how to welcome all people as children of God, how to get that done, okay? And then Cheryl Buckley is going to start her class next Sunday, and she's going to be doing some of the same thing, only she's going to be basing on some of the experiences in this wonderful book that she'll be sharing with you. So it's really very powerful. So I hope to return next Sunday, and then Cheryl will begin her series next Sunday. But for today, what I want to focus on, again, we talked about the why of this, why we try to treat all people as children of God. The why is because in them is the image and the light of God, right? That's our theological basis for welcoming all people as children of God, okay? As just basic children of God. The why of it, because the image of God is in them. They're human beings. Last Sunday we started on the how you get it done thing. How you get it done. And I emphasized the fact, and this was sort of a new revelation for me, which came not from my thoughts, but from the guy that wrote this book, that Jesus really didn't discriminate people or judge people as being bad or good. Because I think in some ways he thought all people are a little of both. But how did we say Jesus did apparently really discriminate? A matter of humility or pride. And I think this guy was right, that Jesus did get pretty snarky with people who were full of pride, full of themselves. But as long as he saw in people a sense of humility, he would be quite open and quite welcoming and trying to nudge them on to something greater. So that's what we said last week. Today we're going to talk about speaking to people as children of God, about listening to people, how to do that as children of God, and then also trying to help people and also being helped. So would you bow with me, and we'll ask the Holy Spirit to be our teacher. Let us pray. Gracious God, now as we again gather, trying desperately to regard all people as your children and see your image in them. God, help us today to see what we need to see, hear what we need to hear, to feel and experience all that you have there for us. All so that we can love you above all else and love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Amen. Amen. Okay, I'm gonna try to keep myself behind this little podium so I stay in view of the camera and also keep my breath away from you. So looking at your little handout, by the way, I've got extras from the previous 2 weeks that you can get after our meeting today. Looking at the handout, what I'm just calling this is tools that we can use to welcome all, okay? And by the way, a lot of this stuff I use for couples who are preparing for marriage. Because speaking and listening and helping is all about the marriage covenant, right? So a lot of this I've stolen from my other material, but it does come from the scripture. So number one, speaking to people. How to speak to people as fellow children of God. Paul said in Ephesians, speak the truth in love. One of the best ways, and one of the most disarming ways, especially when you encounter someone that looks, seems, acts, sounds very, very different, or maybe even you detect a little bit of hostility, offer them your name. Hi, I'm Jim. What's your name? It's completely disarming and it's completely humanizing. You're acknowledging them as people. You are a person and you have a name. I'm a person and I have a name. And I want my name to matter to you and I want your name to matter to me. Hi, I'm Joel. What's your name? You'd be surprised how it disarms people. The next thing, I've seen this done with really masterful, let us call them public, what do you call it in stores, people that have to deal with the troublemakers?
Customer service.
Customer service. Thank you, Cindy. My brain's addled. The really good ones, you know what they do? I've watched them do this. They give the person their name, hi, and they smile. And you know what? It melts the meanies. I've seen it. It really brings the temperature down. Just smile at them. It's hard to do with a mask. I'm learning how to smile with my mask on, with my eyes. There's a way to do it. Just squint those eyes up. So, your name and just smile at people. Smiles, oh my gosh, how humanizing they are, okay? In 1 Peter chapter 2, it just says, be kind, respectful, and civil. Be kind, respectful, and civil. I don't know what I can say much more about that. Respect them as people. Be civil. Don't return nastiness. Just be civil. And it's sometimes extremely difficult to do. I don't know about you, but sometimes I can really get my back up and I want to get really defensive. It's just a part of my nature. And it's completely unhelpful. Okay, it's completely unhelpful. 2 Thessalonians, you hear this every Sunday in the charge. Do not return insults, whatever they may be. For one thing, it may get you in some really deep doo-doo. But don't return insults, even if they're hurled at you. I love this next one, chapter 5. Say what you mean, and mean what you say. Don't be insincere, but you don't have to say it meanly. Don't be mean when you say it. Say what you mean what you say, but don't be mean when you say it. Focus on them and their concerns. Ask about their well-being. How are things going? What about disagreements? In times of disagreements, Presbyterians put out this wonderful pamphlet. I think it was way back in the mid-'80s when we started fighting about all sorts of things. They put out this pamphlet called Seeking to be Faithful Together, trying to help us as a church, different church bodies, learn how to fight fairly, learn how to argue, learn how to disagree. It's a wonderful pamphlet. So some of this comes from this. But stick to issues, not to personalities, right? Stay with the issues. That's why we don't do so well talking about politics, because we go after personalities more than we discuss issues. So try to stay with the issues, not about the person that you disagree with, or about trying to judge their motives or their intents or their malevolence, but try to stay with the issues. Try to stay above the fray. Stay with issues more than personalities, especially the questioning of motives. And of course, refrain from accusations and judgments and unhelpful critique. I teach this a lot to couples who are marrying. When you have a big fight, if you really want to know how to blow it completely out of the water, start accusing your partner, start finding fault. Grab something out of the air about something that happened months or years ago. If you want to make sure that you will get nowhere, just do that. In psychological speak, they call it kitchen sinking. It means finding everything but the kitchen sink, and throwing it at them. Don't do that. Stay together. Don't accuse. Try not to judge motives or intents. Just try to speak your truth and be careful. Use a lot of I language. I feel this. Oh, really? And number 9, we talked about this earlier. Just take a genuine interest in people. A genuine interest in people with well-placed questions. How are things going for you today? Having a good day? Whatever. Just depending on the situation, whether you're meeting up with a person on the street, or someone in the grocery store, or you're in a school board meeting where they're ready to kill each other over stupid masks, or something like that. Take a genuine interest in the other person, care about them and their well-being. Okay. So in other words, just try to take the attention off of you and put it on them. Let them know that you care about them about them as people more than about their position on an issue, etc. And it's a good way to communicate. Any comments or questions about that? Anybody had it work really well? Any of those 9 things? Mary Ann?
I was negotiating with the schools I represented.
I'm going to repeat all this. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
I represented labor, and we had interest-based bargaining, and we sat in a circle
Okay.
instead of one side opposed to the
Right.
other. And you put on the board what ideas you had for the issues.
Yeah.
And you were not allowed to say, well, that was a dumb issue.
Yeah.
You listened to everybody's opinion of how to solve the
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah. Excellent.
And you come to a consensus.
Yeah. Mary Ann said she was involved in school board bargaining, right? And you were on the labor side. And they, number one, they weren't allowed to sit on sides.
No,
They sat in a circle. Okay, again, a disarming thing. And that you had to stay on issues, right? Not on
personalizing.
no personalizing, no judgments, no accusations. Stay on the issues. And then also, I'd love to talk about bargaining. You know, finding common ground. I'd like to talk to those idiots in Washington right now. Oops, that was a judgment, wasn't it? That was an accusation and name calling. Well, they're not here, so it doesn't count. All right, anyway, so that's excellent, Marianne. That's exactly what we're trying to say here. Stay with
You didn't call anybody stupid or dumb. You
Yeah.
had to listen to their,
Yeah.
what they sort of
Yeah.
felt was the issue.
Let them be heard. Right. Okay. Now, Steve. No.
Well, I'm just, you know, to me, we all need friends.
Yep.
And they are people that we don't have to be entirely careful.
Right.
But in my life, I hope I live these.
Yeah. Even with our friends.
Well, even with our friends, but I can also be a little more bold,
Yep.
vent, as we say,
Yeah.
with friends and family
Yeah.
who understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
But certainly not strangers, not.
Yeah, yeah. Steve makes a really good point. He said, you know, we all know we have circles of relationships where we are a little freer to spout off, you know, and because there's an agreement within there that, you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas and that sort of thing. And there's places where I can go, and mainly around Steve and Cinda's dinner table, where I can say close to what I think. But we all know that it stays there. But what Steve's point is, I think, is that you just can't do that out in public and in forums where there are people that have different opinions or convictions or whatever. You know, so you've got to really be respectful and aware of that. And that's about being neighborly and being careful about that. That's one reason why I think this church, everybody wants to, do they fight in your church? Do they fight in your church? And I said, you know, really we don't do very much fighting at all. And someone said, well, why is that? And I go, number one, they're all pretty well behaved. We have a few loose ones every once in a while. But the reason why we do get along, it's not because we all think the same, because I'm telling you, we don't. But we're respectful. We allow people to have their thoughts and opinions. When we come together, we try to talk respectfully in front of each other, share ideas without forming sides, without throwing accusations. Do we all agree? No, we don't, and we know it. In fact, I think there are some pretty profound differences of opinion and theology here in politics, too. But we respect one another. And it's a mark of the beauty of this place and this congregation that isn't true and isn't present in a lot of congregations. Just saying. Sandy.
Well, I think if you had noticed there's a hot button topic,
Yeah.
I think sometimes it helps if you just upfront agree, disagree, and don't talk about it.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you have to do that. You just have an understanding. We're not on the same page with this.
Right.
And so, and sometimes it's just not appropriate in all places to talk about whatever that disagreement is about. You just, we all do this with family. I do. We have to, Marie.
We had a pastor, Rick Banner, who said church is a place where we practice being Christian.
There it is. And the thing is that what we do here, we need to take out there and do the same thing. Find, I know there are people in my life that I generally like them, for the most part, but I also know that they know where I stand on certain things, and I know that they stand in different places. And I know sometimes barbs are thrown out to sort of draw me into some sort of a confrontation or an argument. And number one, I just don't have the energy for it. And for the most part, I know that often that's not where minds are changed or how they're changed. And so you have to sort of resist those little hooks to sort of get you into one of those verbal altercations. So just be aware of it. Anything else? Those are all great comments. Joe? He's Joel and you're Joe. We'll let Joe go first, then Joel. Okay, Joe, go ahead. Yeah, Joe, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
Tell me more. Not right now, but there's often you can learn a little something by somebody who doesn't agree with it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell me more, and maybe we might.
And that's the listening part. You're absolutely right, Joe. Tell me more. Tell me more. So we're going to get to that. Hang on to that thought. Joel.
Maybe you look, how do you get beyond how are you? If somebody says to me, how are you? I go, well, you really want to know my hip hurts?
Yeah.
Do you really want to know how I am?
Yeah. How do you get beyond how are you? Sometimes it's a throwaway line. I'm not going to tell the cashier how I'm really doing. Number one, she or he, they don't care, I don't think. That's a line we use. It's insincere. It's meant to be nice. I get that. But what we can do is say, I'm fine. How are things going for you today? And sometimes they will say, blah, 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 blah. But I think sometimes, Joel, you just can't. But look for the opening and say, and sometimes cashiers will do that. They'll just let her go. And you listen. And then by the end you say, I hope the rest of your day goes better for you. I've had some great conversations with cashiers. Do you remember that sermon I did a long time ago? What was it about? Mother's Day. And it was in Home Depot, I think. And some dumb butt in front of me, oops, I shouldn't say dumb butt, says to the woman, younger woman, are you a mother? And she said, no. Well, I was going to wish you a happy birthday, but never mind, or happy Mother's Day, but never mind. Now, I don't know the circumstances of that woman's life, but that was an insult, and it was hurtful. So I walked up to her and said, well, I wish you a happy Mother's Day. And she smiled and she said, thanks, hon. You don't know this, you got to be careful what you say. But I'd like to think that I brought a tiny bit of salve to that wound that dummy inflicted on her for no good reason. And we can do that if you listen for opportunities to do it. Marie.
I had thought about initiating conversation.
Yeah.
That's what Joe means. How are you? That's so meaningless anymore.
It is.
Beyond that. Going beyond that is what have you been up to?
Yeah.
And express interest.
Yeah. Or sometimes I'll say, and often I don't like their fingernails. I'll say, great fingernails, or, it's to humanize them, because, they don't feel human. They feel they're paid awful. They are. And there we are with all our money. So take an interest. And just remember, the tables could be turned. But find other ways to show concern and empathy and interest in whether it's a cashier or whatever. Just, it can be quite a fun thing. Find ways to show them that they're people and that their lives are important. no matter what they do for a living. Jan?
Just in response to Joe's question, I think you could just say, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I mean, you just say, okay, because you're not going to list everything
Yeah.
that's on. Thanks for asking. So nice that you care to ask.
Yeah, just something really sweet and kind like that.
Get back to someone.
Yeah, right, Jeff.
There's times when I've approached people and I've asked them how they're doing. And they pick up on my sincerity of my curiosity, how are things going?
Yeah. They do. I think most people know when it's sincere. I think most of us have pretty good nose for that when it's a sincere thing. So even if their question is insincere, it's not insincere, it's just a throwaway. Just acknowledge it and find other ways to say, you're a human and you're important, and what you do is important, and I appreciate it. All right, yes, Marianne.
I think we should also remember to keep an open mind,
Open mind.
accepting of differences
Yeah.
in other people. I mean, we just need to keep an open mind. And that's not true, a lot of people have closed minds.
Yeah. I remember once I was in, I think it was Mark's, and the person in back of me was a cross-dresser, obviously so. And there were people staring in ways that were very unkind. And thankfully the cashier was very kind, and I turned and I don't know what I said. I tried, but there are ways that we need to keep, that's a human being in there. We don't understand all of that. But it's a human being inside there, and a child of God, and you need to respect that. Yes, Sean?
I was just thinking a little bit on the how are you doing aspect and how that's changed more recently. And not necessarily a question, but it's thinking about how that dynamic has been affected with social media, where everybody's putting up how they're every little detail
Every
of
little
how
thing,
they're
yeah.
doing to the
My
point
mother
where it
said,
drives some of
"Putting
us
their dirty laundry
sick.
out there for everybody to see.
Yeah, so I think that's had an effect on it.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. I think, not everybody, but a lot of people, I think, put out way too much information. But I'm just more of a private person, I just don't do it. You all know that. I own it. You're never going to find me on Facebook. Not going to happen. Never, ever, 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 ever. So, thank you, Sean. All right, let's talk about listening, and then we're going to get out. Actually, more important, remember what James, the apostle, said? Be quick to listen and slow to speak. Most of us are pretty good talkers. What most of us are not as good at is listening. So here are just a few pointers and ideas on how to become better listeners. So as people are speaking, really listen intently. Listen as if you have to repeat what was said with some degree of accuracy. What do most of us do when we're listening to someone talk? We're often racing ahead, thinking about what we're going to say next. And we're not really listening to what the person has said, which means we can miss content, we can misunderstand content, or etc. So when they're speaking, just really listen to what they say, and when they're done, you can find a way to repeat back something, or with a nod of the head or something that acknowledges that you're listening to everything that they had to say. So do not, what I call fake listening. You know when people are fake listening? They're not listening to what you're saying. They're ready to, they want it the first moment they can jump in and add their own 2 cents or contradict something you've said. All those little wheels are going around in their head. Fake listening. Don't do that. Always try to maybe take a breath after someone's finished. Take a breath and just let there be a little bit of silence. So don't just jump in there to outdo or whatever. Number 3, repeat what is said when it's appropriate. It's not always appropriate to repeat everything, but especially if you're in a little bit of a disagreement, and again, I teach this with couples who are marrying, repeat what is said. Number 1, it says to the person that just spoke that you are sincerely interested in hearing what they have to say and their perspective. And as Marianne said, When we listen with an open mind, guess what? We may, and I think Joe said this, we may just hear something that might change our perspective. The fact is, they could have something true and helpful and beautiful to say that we've been missing. Maybe we're wrong and what they have to say is right. And if we don't listen with an open mind or listen at all, we're not going to hear any of it. But listening that way really turns down the temperature. Number 4, don't interrupt and don't cut people off. It's hard to do. In times of disagreement or hostile encounter, do not bring up unrelated. That's that kitchen sinking thing I told you about. Stick with the issue at hand. Don't bring up some other crazy issue. It's not helpful. Stay with the issue at hand. And number 6, and this really involves an entire mindset change. Speak less to convince someone and simply more to reveal your own feelings, your own convictions, your own ideas. Don't say it with an idea of, I'm going to change you. That's why none of us really like people who are evangelistic. The street people, either the Mormons or the crazy evangelicals. You know why I don't like them? Because I always feel like they know that I'm all wrong and a sinner, and they want to convince me that I am. That's something I already know. But that they're all right. That they have everything together. And it's just so obnoxious. And it's like, I don't even want to listen. Nothing about it makes me even want to listen to it for a second, right? Because they come at it thinking they're all about changing you. You are the object of their attention because you are the patient, And it's a very one-sided kind of it's not even a dialogue, really. It's a very one-sided kind of a thing. It's very, very uncomfortable, and it's why that whole concept of witnessing to people in the street or in the grocery store or whatever is very unhelpful. Very, in my opinion, very, very unhelpful, and it very, very rarely ever changes someone's life. You change someone's life when you develop relationships, you get to know them, and they see something in you that they find attractive or compelling, and they start asking questions, and et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? So speak less to convince someone, and just more out of your own. So that, like if I'm in a bar or something, and somebody says something kind of snarky about religion, so rather than me, get my feathers all whatever, I just say, well, this is how I feel, this is why I'm a part of it or whatever. And it turns the temperature down, and sometimes they actually listen. Am I convincing them of everything? No. Because number one, the God they don't believe in doesn't exist. But I don't say all that to try to convince them. Just try to share out of your own life. And it works. Questions about that? Mary Ann?
I think you're like Dominic. When my son was 4 years old, he said to his father, he was very angry. He said, "Do you think you're being fair?" And my husband said, "Why do you say that?" And then he told us what his problem was, and we had no idea that it even existed.
Yep.
But instead of clamping down at
The authority, yeah.
he said, "Why do you say that?"
Yeah, the why question. Why? Why do you say that?
Yeah, why do you say that?
Listening to a 4-year-old. Yeah.
And Jim,
I've never had one, but I'm guessing that can be hard to do. Yes, Steve.
and I would just add all the nonverbal stuff.
Yeah.
The body language,
Yeah.
the look in their face,
Yeah.
the innuendo, and the way they say the words.
Yeah.
Because we can say, like I've taught in a class, I love you. You can say I love you. That makes it sound like I'm about to kill you.
Right.
And I hate your guts. So it doesn't. So you can say I love you 97 different ways,
Yeah.
and it will tell people exactly where you're coming from.
Exactly. Yeah.
And body language.
Yeah.
People look defeated. People look fatigued. People are tired. And that's a very different
Yeah.
message
Yeah.
than, everything's just fine.
Yeah.
You don't look like everything.
I would say pay attention to people when you're out and watch the people who do this well. Watch what they do. Watch their body language. Because some people are just super good at this. You know, watch what they do, the way they smile, the things they say, the disarming ways. One of the most disarming people I know is Sharon Boone. By the way, we're installing her as, finally, after 7 years, pastor at Bethany Church this afternoon. But anyway, she just has this most disarming way about her. I can never see her doing anything hostile or mean or cruel. And so watch models of really good behavior. Because sometimes that's the best way to learn. Just watch others who do it well and just mimic what they do. Because some of us do it better than others. Thank you, Steve. Very important. Okay, real quickly, then the other thing that, this is from Shirley Guthrie, by the way, the helping and being helped. Helping and being helped as a way to acknowledge the child of God in all people. Good old Matthew 25, right? Good old Matthew 25, which is a very important scripture in the life of our denomination right now. When you did it to the least of these, you did it unto me. So help people. See Jesus the human one in the eyes of the suffering. If you try to see the eyes of Jesus in that person who's asking you for money, or the person who's sick and suffering or whatever, it really does change the equation. It really does. And I think Mother Teresa taught this, to try to see the eyes of Jesus, the eyes of Christ in the little ones, the suffering people of the world. Try to imagine Jesus in them, the suffering Christ. At the same time, remember that sometimes there are forms of help that are unhelpful. And I could say a lot more about that, but sometimes there are forms of help. For example, I don't know, someone asks you to do something for them that's illegal or harmful to them. Of course, you don't, that's a form of help that is unhelpful, right? So you want to do helpful things that are for their well-being. Always try to do the right thing. Just always try to do the right thing. The right thing by people. And as I said earlier, sometimes turn the table. Imagine yourself in another person's position. You're the least of these. How would that feel to you if we spoke to someone? No. Always remember, I don't want to say but for the grace of God, because I think that diminishes the grace of God, but the tables could be turned, right? The tables could be turned. And remember that. How would you want to be treated and spoken to if you were one of the least of these and the suffering people? Also, and this is something that Shirley Guthrie said that never really occurred to me, sometimes we need to be gracious recipients of help in order to acknowledge the image of God in other people who are trying to help us. Be gracious recipients of help given. Beyond just saying thank you or appreciate that, but acknowledge they are human beings and they have provided some kind of help and comfort for you. Sometimes I have purposefully asked someone who's very different from me. I've asked them for help for something like directions or do you know, are you aware of? And number one, they're shocked that, a white dude would ask them that. And then when they're done, I say, thank you, you have been so helpful to me. Friends, I just can't tell you how that just humanizes everybody in the equation. Learn how to be a gracious recipient and asker for help. Affirm them. And then also, you know how guys don't like to ask for directions? Guilty. Part of it's pride. I do not want to admit that I don't know where I am. All right? Same thing is true here. We need to humble ourselves and ask for help sometimes. That we're not completely self-sufficient. That sometimes there are things we need from other people we just can't do for ourselves. We have to humble ourselves and ask for it, humanize ourselves, and humanize another person by saying, you are capable of blessing and helping me or the world. You are a human being. You're a child of God, and you can do this for me, even if that person is very, very different from us. receive help from a Muslim person or a person who feels rough and tumble, and then just shower them with gratitude. Thank you, you've been so helpful to me. Why? Because we're viewed as people who are the people in power that have everything, and we don't need anybody's help, right? We need to humble ourselves from that and be humble and gracious recipients of help from other people, especially people who are different from us. Does that make sense? That just never really occurred to me, people, until kind of recently. I don't know if it's occurred to you, but it never really occurred to me. Any comments or thoughts about that?
Cheryl talked in her sermon at the beginning about the breadth of culture.
Yeah.
It's not just the symphony we have, the museums we have, and the cuisine we generally, the meatloaf we eat. But having lived overseas and been involved where I'm now thrown into a culture which has got a lot of things about it that are not like us.
Yep.
And this is where the body language, the listening is really important because, and observe it, we're going to get some Afghanistani people here, and men do not touch the women. Guys, you never touch the women. And if the man holds your hand while he's talking to you, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean you're gay. They love to hold hands. So that's just two illustrations. I work with a Syrian family. If the father is not home, I work with these people for years. I don't go in the house. Because I'm not related to the women.
And you know what? And learning the intricacies of their culture and their traditions is a way of showing respect and humility and saying, you too are a child of God, and I will respect those pieces of your life and your culture. And Steve, you are right up there with among the finest of those who are incredibly hospitable and welcoming to people, especially people who are, because I've seen him in action, I've seen him do it. And you're a real model for all of us. And that's one reason why I'm grateful that you and Cinda are here at this church, because you really modeled that for us. You really brought that. Even though you're a white dude and all that, you've modeled that for us. So thank you. But you're right.
Well, there's demands to diversity.
Yes, there are. There are. And people who don't like it move away. All right. It's probably after 12. I thank you all for being here and being part of this. Marie.
I have just one more thought. It's listening, but it falls under the last part, number 2. Sometimes some kinds of help is unhelpful. Like the little phrase, unasked for advice is unwanted.
Yes. Yeah. Some of us give a lot of advice. It's meant well, usually. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's malevolent. But I've learned that, and I used to enjoy giving advice, and I've sort of dialed that back. Because I've learned a lot of people don't when they really don't want it. And it can be perceived as being controlling and manipulative. So just be careful about any advice and direction you give. Some people are really good direction givers and love doing it. And some of us don't like hearing it. So we have to be careful. That's a great point, Marie. So thank you for bringing it up. All right, everybody, have yourself a fabulous Sunday afternoon. And again, be sure to be here for Cheryl's class next Sunday. It's going to be a barn burner. Okay.